I'm Matthew Eadie from Evanston Now. I just wrapped up an interview with Illinois State Senator Mike Simmons. He's a candidate for Congress in the Ninth Congressional District of Illinois, looking to succeed longtime Representative Jan Schakowsky, who announced last May she would not be seeking re-election to a 15th term in the United States Congress. Evanston Now will be conducting as many interviews as we can with the top candidates between now and mid-February when early voting starts in Chicago. So stay tuned for more. But for the first interview, it's State Senator Mike Simmons. Joining us now is State Senator Mike Simmons, candidate for Congress in the Ninth Congressional District of Illinois. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
So let's get right into it. This is obviously a very busy season. The past week has been extremely busy as well. We're recording this on January 8th, and I really want to start with what's kind of dominating the news right now. Just yesterday in Minneapolis, a 37-year-old woman was shot and killed by federal agents. You've been very outspoken about ICE in this campaign. They've obviously been active in the Ninth District and across the Chicago area. What was your initial reaction yesterday when you heard the news of that? We'll start there.
I was outraged and heartbroken to see this happen. And we know that Donald Trump is unleashing fascism on us every day. We saw it during Operation Blitz when he sent Midway Blitz when he sent federal ICE agents into Evanston, literally at the corner of Asbury and Maine, just right down the street where my father lives, as an Ethiopian asylum seeker. And then we saw it yesterday play out where just cold murder in broad daylight, uh, government agents, ICE agents, thugs who are funded by our taxpayer dollars, who are carrying out this fascism. And so, my heart is broken. I was at the vigil last night in Evanston, with hundreds of neighbors. And I just honestly felt a real deep sense of sadness that I can't believe we're seeing this play out. Um, as the son of an asylum seeker who fled Ethiopia, where this very same thing was playing out, people being murdered in broad daylight. My uncle, who I never got to meet, was abducted at the age of 24 years old because he learned to speak English and was perceived as a threat to a tyrannical government. And it's what a travesty that a generation later, I'm seeing this play out in my lifetime. It just sickens me.
Yeah, you in a post on social media just shortly after the news started circulating everywhere, you called them ICE a thinly veiled job program for thugs. You've called for the abolishment of ICE. You've kind of had that as an active part of your campaign, and so have several other candidates. I'm wondering what you think, though. Calling for it is the easy part, obviously, and you know that. But actually doing it when getting to Congress would be something that's far more difficult. How is that going to happen? I mean, what is your idea, and are the Democrats going to be in a position you think that you'll actually be able to do that when you get there? And as you say, abolish ICE. And do you feel that some have called for even going further and have called this a problem that the Department of Homeland Security has, that it's not just ICE? What's your take on that?
Yeah, so I've said publicly and as part of my platform that if I win this primary and become the next member of Congress from the Ninth District, within my first 10 days, I would introduce legislation to abolish ICE. And that means bringing forth the bill. That means advocating loudly for it. That means standing in coalition with other organizations that want to protect our democracy, that will put the political weight behind it. And then honestly, it's drawing on my experience as a state senator where I've passed 50 bills and know how to fight the fight behind the scenes. It's getting in those committee rooms with those committee chairmen who are woefully out of touch with the American people, and is fighting toe to toe, insisting on zeroing out, disbanding ICE as an agency. I cannot have a reformist approach to ICE. I don't know how you reform an agency that kills people in broad daylight. It has got to go. And I think that there has to be a movement a movement towards this. We've seen that all across the country. And as a member of Congress, I would be pushing both at the rallies and in public, but also behind the scenes. And frankly, using leverage as a member of Congress to force the issue. Matthew, we saw in the big, beautiful bill that the Trump administration put $170 billion into ICE. And that $170 billion was taken from healthcare and defunding Medicaid. It was taken from education assistance programs. And that's not even to mention the war that Donald Trump has waged on the Department of Education, on laying off our federal workers. And that's a fight that our generation must fight, and I would be on the front lines of that. And in my work in the Illinois Senate, I think I've shown myself to be a very effective legislator when it comes to actually making things happen. And this would be my top priority coming into there. But it wouldn't just stop there. We need to abolish ICE, but we also need to have trials now for the ICE agents who have invaded our communities. I think those ICE agents that punched someone in the head, punched one of our neighbors in Evanston, should face a trial. And it's not going to happen if members of Congress don't have the spine and the backbone to call for those trials. And it doesn't matter if a Republican or a Democrat is Speaker of the House. We have to fight these fights no matter what, well, no matter who's in charge. And there are too many Democrats that fold on these issues and they make excuses and say, well, if the Republicans are in control, we won't be able to actually call for any kind of trials. And shame on them for giving up before the fight has even started. Part of this is political. If we keep making the case, I think Democrats will actually win back the Congress, and then we need to bring forward articles of impeachment against Donald Trump. I think that's something that we should be doing right now. We should be bringing forward articles of impeachment against Peter Hegseth, and absolutely should be impeaching Kristi Noem, especially after what we saw with this cold-blooded murder yesterday.
I want to ask you about what you kind of just mentioned. I want to ask you about the Democratic Party in general. And you had just brought up a point that you thought Democrats who you say don't have a spine to, and they kind of back down from some of these positions that, a lot of progressives are taking at this point. Who are you talking about when you bring up those things? Like, are you willing to name names, and why not? It's just people, I know a lot of Democrats talk about it and they get a little nervous when someone asks them, who's not doing enough right now? Who do you think's not doing enough right now?
Yeah, I think the problem is endemic with the Democratic Party. And look, the Democratic Party is flailing wildly right now. People are still reeling that Donald Trump managed to win a second term, defeating Kamala Harris in 2000. No, a lot of our Democrats around the country are still upset about that. And the example I would give you is the government shutdown. On a Sunday in November, we saw that 8 Democrats in the United States Senate made a deal in good faith with Republicans who, at the time, were using SNAP and hunger, political weapon, withholding SNAP benefits from my constituents on the far north side of Chicago. I can't negotiate in good faith with people who operate that way, and that they're Democrats in power that are operating in good faith with Republicans that take that type of mean-spirited approach. Our party is really in trouble. We are on life support right now. And I think the solution is it's gonna take a new generation of bold and outspoken leaders who understand what hunger feels like. I grew up in public housing in the ninth district. There were times when our family didn't have enough money to put enough food on the table. And it breaks my heart to think about my mom when I was a kid, sitting up late at the kitchen table, trying to hide from me that she was having to make undignified decisions between whether we would have enough food in the refrigerator or whether we would have hot water in the winter. That is the experience that I have and that I bring into this race. And I think it takes that level of experience to really be able to fight effectively when I was a Democrat, and be able to actually overcome the fascism, and the hatred and policy violence that continues to be handed down from the Trump administration. So that's how I feel about this. I would also just point out that in the Illinois Senate, I introduced legislation in 2022 that would make Illinois a sanctuary state for trans families. I had to fight my own party to get that bill to come up for a vote. And I remember on a cold day in January of 2023 during the lame duck session, looking my Democratic colleagues in the face in an internal caucus meeting and saying, I will not take another photo with you at a pride parade if you can't give us a vote on protecting trans youth right now when they are being hunted by surrounding states. It shouldn't have taken me as the only openly gay member of the Illinois Senate to say something like that, to spook out some of my colleagues and actually be able to move that bill forward. And that's the type of energy I would bring to Congress. And I think that is how we actually start to get ourselves out of the morass that we're in.
Sure, but also, like, to be real, you're going to be a freshman in Congress if you're elected. Bottom of the bench, and bottom of the bench in Springfield is probably very different than the bottom of the bench in Washington, as I'm sure you know and can expect. You're going to be fighting a really uphill battle as a, younger freshman in Washington. What's your message to voters? Why are you prepared for that fight? And how are you going to keep the promises you make in this campaign when a lot of progressives have been disappointed in the past by politicians who have made promises, progressive promises, and then kind of back down from them when they're faced with Washington lobbyists and a lot of money and a lot of pressure? I mean, what prepares you for that? I know you've done it here, but like I said, Springfield and Washington are very different places, I'm sure.
Yeah. At the end of the day, this comes down to power and how people use power. And the reality is that right now, we need a new generation of people in Congress like myself who understand the pain, that have been close to the pain, and understand the urgency and the fight that's needed to be effective in some of these policy battles. Let's take the whole issue of the fact that affordability right now is a crisis all across the country. I understand growing up what it's like to not have health care. I remember when I was in high school, I ran track. I had shin splints. My mom had to pull me out of track, and we couldn't go to the doctor. And I had to quit an activity that any child in America should be able to participate as a high school student. I understand what that's like, and I don't want the next generation of young people to grow up in households where people don't have health care. And the reality is that the people that are in Congress right now, hopefully out of touch with their constituents. We have members of Congress that don't do town halls, that don't communicate with their constituents what's happening behind the scenes. That is something that is a hallmark of my tenure in the state, says having monthly town halls and keeping it really real with my constituents about the fights that we're having to fight internally. And frankly, organizing my constituents so that we can push those in power to make things happen. This is how I was able to help get the child tax credit passed in Illinois. It was the very first bill I introduced when I came to the Illinois Senate. And when I was a candidate, I talked about how economic insecurity is a big problem across Illinois and across the Senate district I represent. And I brought forward that bill, and it took 3 years of introducing that legislation, organizing with coalitions, and organizing single moms in my district who gave me the political cover to push on that and actually make it happen. That's the type of approach that I would bring to Congress on behalf of the Ninth District. That takes intentionality, that takes fervor, that takes really understanding the pain that people are going through. And I think that that is what is going to actually advance the ball for so many of our communities right now around the country. And it doesn't matter, even as a freshman member of Congress, it doesn't matter if the Republicans or Democrats are in control. I hope the Democrats take back Congress. We are up against the wall right now in this country. But that type of energy that I have and passion is part of what is needed right now, and it doesn't matter if I'm a freshman or 4 or 5 terms in. That's the type of energy I'm coming in with, and I really genuinely believe that we would start to have a different set of outcomes in Congress if we have more people there who truly want to represent the people that put them in power and are not worried about big donors. They are not worried about corporations that continue to donate to their campaigns. They're damn sure not worried about APAC. I'm not taking a penny from APAC. I am not going to be someone in Congress who's rolling out the red carpet for special interests that think that I owe them something. And I offer my campaign as an example of how I would govern. I've not taken money from any of those types of entities, which is why I'm able to have the kind of outspoken campaign that I've had and type of ambitious and bold policy proposals that are reflected in my platform, which is at mikesimmons.org, and which has been reflected in what I've been saying in forums, and absolutely has been reflected in the 50 bills that I've passed in the Illinois Senate in just under 5 years.
I want to ask you about something that you brought up, specifically about Democratic Party leadership. You said you hope the Democrats take back the House, obviously, regardless of whether that is the case or not. Whoever's elected in this seat will be obligated to vote for a party leader, whether that's party leader or party speaker. Um, will you support Hakeem Jeffries in 2027 if you're elected?
I think on day one, my first priority is assiduously representing my constituents. It is not a done deal on who I will support for leadership positions. It's going to start with a conversation. What committees am I able to serve on to advocate for my district? Healthcare is at a crisis point in the Ninth District. We're seeing health insurance premiums starting to skyrocket as a result of the impasse on healthcare. We continue to see people who are being churned and kicked off of Medicaid as a result of the new draconian requirements that are coming down the pike. And I would want to serve on the Energy and Commerce Committee so that I can advocate for that. I would want to serve on the transportation committee so I can advocate for public transit, really champion public transit in Congress, which no one is doing right now. And that's really what it would come down to for me. And whoever is running for leadership, if they can really meet the needs that I have on behalf of my constituents, then they would have my confidence. But none of that is a done deal at this point.
Who is in touch in the Democratic Party? You said leaders are woefully out of touch. Who do you think is in the right place?
I mean, I think it's who, the voters can tell you, who are the members of Congress who are not folding on the government shutdown? Who are the members of Congress doing monthly town halls and are taking the time to visit their districts, are taking the time to talk to immigrant and refugee communities that have been traumatized by the ICE raids? Who are the members of Congress that are taking the time to translate their newsletters into the languages that their constituents speak and the way that I have in the Illinois Senate? Those are the folks that I think are really meeting the moment right now. And the proof is in the pudding, right? And then you look at the members of Congress and ask yourselves, how are they spending their time there? How are they communicating their accomplishments to their constituents? What are they using with the power that they've been entrusted with? How creative and innovative are they in terms of handling the position of a member of Congress? I've been proud in the Illinois Senate to put together 9 people's legislative councils that are comprised of underrepresented communities, right? We've got people's legislative councils for single parents. They were part of the coalition to help me to put the child tax credit together. We have people's councils for those that are returning citizens, for those that are refugees, for those that are survivors of gun violence, for those that are LGBTQ, for those that are longtime residents, people that are being priced out of the ninth district because of the housing crisis. And those are the folks that have co-governed with me in the kind of bills that I've passed in the Illinois Senate. Of the 50 bills I've passed, about half of them have come from directly from constituents. I think it'd be really interesting to see what that model would look like at the congressional level for the ninth district. And I think that we'll see more people around the country that are going to start to take that approach to governing, because I think that is what is really needed in the current moment.
There's obviously no secret this week. Jan Schakowsky, the current incumbent, who you are all running to succeed, is endorsing Daniel Biss, the mayor of Evanston, one of the candidates that's polling the highest in this race so far. Obviously the polls that we've seen are mostly internal polls. There's been one independent poll that's come out. You haven't polled above 10% in any of those that we've seen. If you have your own internals, that's something that you might have. But of what's out there, some voters are saying, and I've heard from voters that I've spoken to, and other party insiders and political insiders who have said, they feel like they haven't seen you as aggressively campaigning against these candidates. You're obviously out in the community, you're campaigning, but against your top opponents. I mean, candidate or voters are going to go to the polls in about a month, and they're going to have confidence. They only get one vote. I mean, we don't have ranked choice voting in this state. It's one vote. They have to elect somebody who I would think they're going to vote for somebody who they hope can actually win. What's your pitch to voters that at this point, with you're not competing with the top fundraisers, you're not competing with the top pollsters at this point? Why do you think, and what's your pitch to voters why you think you're actually a viable candidate this close to election day?
Yeah. I would start off with the voters that I've been talking to on doors, literally every night of the week and on weekends, don't care about horse race politics. They're much more interested in talking about, what am I going to do about affordability? What am I going to do about the folks that are worried about their health insurance premiums going up? What am I thinking about the crisis that we're seeing right now in education and in our schools? What solutions do I have to really address the environmental crisis that we all are living through right now, where we continue to see fossil fuels and big corporations pollute our air, our land, and our water? Those are the issues that people care about right now. And I am confident that my message and my experience and my record in the Illinois Senate, I put my record up against any other candidate in this field. 50 bills passed in less than 5 years, bills that create the new child tax credit in Illinois. I passed legislation last year that I worked on with Governor Pritzker, that is now law, that erases medical debt in our state. Medical debt that has been cleared for 357,000 households to date. $340 million of medical debt erased for those households. legislation that puts Illinois on the path to eliminating forever chemicals, getting plastics out of our Great Lakes and out of the Fox River and out of the Des Plaines rivers, which are all industry. Those are the issues right now that I've been talking about. And I am confident that with my message and my experience in the Illinois Senate and my lived experiences, that I am absolutely a viable candidate in this race. And am well positioned to win this primary because the voters don't care about the horse race politics. What they care about are what solutions do you have, and what has been your record, and what is the message that you are articulating to voters in terms of what you actually will do in Congress once you get there.
Think that voters care about endorsements?
I'm sorry?
Do voters care about endorsements?
I think what voters care about is the affordability crisis. Voters care about what are you talking about doing to increase access to childcare and healthcare. I was out on doors the other night in Rogers Park talking to a mom who cannot afford childcare and who works in a job where she is overextended, where she sometimes doesn't know her schedule until the day before. And she's very curious, what do the candidates have to say about that? Do they even understand what that experience is like, the way I do, in the kind of household I grew up in? How can you represent the communities of the district if you don't understand those kind of struggles firsthand? That's the type of energy and passion that I think people are looking for right now. And I think people are looking for receipts. They want to know that the candidates have done something on these issues and will continue to be active on those issues. And I think that is what the voters care about right now. And that's the those are the set of issues that I've been in dialogue with the voters with in this district, and I think that that is what ultimately will put us over the top. And I want to say also too that those are issues I'm hearing all across the ninth district. I was in McHenry County last week talking to a voter in Cary, Illinois, who is telling me that in some parts of McHenry County, you can't even afford a one-bedroom apartment for under $2,000 right now. That's literally the same thing I hear from voters that are down in Edgewater and Rogers Park right now, where gentrification is happening and people are being priced out. And parts of Evanston now where people can't afford to buy their first home or can't afford to hold on to their home. And I think that's what every time I'm on doors, those are the issues that come up. They're not asking me about endorsements. They're not asking me about, are you attacking an opponent or going after somebody or bringing a negative approach to this? They want to know what kind of solutions do you have and what kind of lived experiences do you have to back that up?
Talked about if you're elected, you would like to be on the Energy and Commerce committee as one of those committees that you're on in Congress. I want to ask you about an energy issue, data centers specifically. You have a piece on your page about data centers and AI. Um, what do you, Bernie Sanders in particular has called for a moratorium on data centers. You've raised concerns about energy usage and stuff like that. What's your thought about that? And how far are you willing to go and take a position on data centers in particular, which is a kind of boring issue for some people, but seems to be something that's actually impacting a lot of energy prices?
Yeah, I mean, this comes right back to the affordability crisis. In Illinois, we see that data centers are sucking up energy and basically outpacing the supply of energy that we have. And we know from basic economics that when demand outstrips supply, prices go up for all of us. And the very real world impact of that is that monthly energy bills are going up for people all across Illinois and across the country, and they're going to continue to go up if no one does anything. I'm proud that in Illinois Senate, I will be bringing forward legislation this spring session that attempts to address this issue. I would absolutely support a moratorium on data centers until we can figure out a way to more equitably distribute the energy supplies that we currently have. And this is all a part of the work that we also need to do to increase the supply of renewable energies all across our country right now, so that we fix the overall energy crisis that we have in this country. And absolutely, if we don't get a grip on our data centers and our AI centers, we're going to continue to see that the supply of energy is outstripped, and people's monthly energy bills are going to continue to go up. And so it may sound like a more obscure issue to some folks, but it really does have real world impact on all of us. And that would even apply to small business owners who also have their share of energy and electric bills. My mom was a small business owner in the ninth district. She ran a salon in Rogers Park for 25 years. And I remember times when she had really high light bills that would come in. And the folks who are the mom and pop business owners in our district right now don't need that. Our Main Street corridors and our suburban retail strips already are feeling the pinch right now of hits to small businesses and programs that don't offer them the type of support that they need to be able to give us all what we want, which is great places to shop and great restaurants and foot traffic, which helps with overall community safety and gives places like Evanston and Skokie the trademark experience that we all love to have in those places. And I'm thinking about the pocketbook issues that are going to affect those people that live in those communities, those small business owners. And AI data centers has absolutely got to be a part of the work that is tackled. And I would absolutely support Bernie Sanders' moratorium and much more to deal with the issue.
Sounds like a lot of the issues that you've talked about, just brought up now, a lot of them are state level issues. I've heard some people say, "Why is he leaving the Senate? I mean, he's an effective legislator. He hasn't been there for that long." What's your response to that? I know you're not term limited at this point. You're not. Your term isn't up in 2026. So even if your House bid is unsuccessful, you'll remain in the state Senate. Um, but why do you want to leave if you feel like you've been so successful in the short time you've been
Yeah.
there?
I mean, let's think about Congress for a minute. I don't look like your typical member of Congress, and I would say that I represent everything Donald Trump is trying to erase. I'm black. I am the child of an Ethiopian asylum seeker. I am openly and proudly gay. I am an effective legislator, and I'm outspoken, and I'm in touch with the community. None of that lines up with Donald Trump's vision for America. And so when I thought about running for Congress, I thought, what an important step it is for me to run for Congress and serve in a body that needs more representation from communities like ours in the Ninth District, who are woefully underrepresented. Um, you know, the immigrant communities are woefully underrepresented. In all of history, there have been only two openly gay and black members of the House of Representatives. If I win this primary on March 17th, I would become the third. And those are communities that are woefully underrepresented. When we talk about, growing up in public housing, there was a whole lot of discussion early in this campaign around SNAP. I actually have had to live on SNAP in this state in Chicago. I know what it's like to all of a sudden see SNAP benefits dry up and to experience food insecurity. That's the type of lived experiences that we need in Congress right now. And that is precisely why I stepped up and decided to seek the office of Congress to represent the Ninth District, because our communities are literally dying right now for a stronger representation and for a more authentic representation for the communities that they live in and struggle in. And so that is why I'm running for Congress. I am so proud of the work that I've done in the Illinois Senate. When I was sworn into the Illinois Senate in 2021, I became the first openly LGBTQ person to ever serve in the body. I became the first Ethiopian American to ever be elected to the Illinois General Assembly. And the short time that I've been there, I have passed 50 bills into law. And I've been a progressive force and an outspoken champion that has pushed back on Republicans who dog whistle on the floor of the Senate and threaten to unleash violence on trans families, which we saw in 2023. I was the only Democrat that got up and spoke out on that. I was the only Democrat that spoke out when we couldn't move forward on legislation to make Illinois a sanctuary state for trans families. And that's the type of energy and that's the type of bold approach that is desperately needed right now in Congress. And so that's why I'm stepping up and I've done, and I'm even prouder of the work that I can do in Congress if I win this congressional primary and go off to be the next member of Congress from the Ninth District.
Yeah, you talked about something just there and a little earlier in this conversation too, kind of about, you pushing your Democratic colleagues as well, trying to get them to support more progressive legislation. There's a lot of conversations in the Democratic Party, and I kind of didn't ask you about this a few minutes ago when we were talking about Democrats, but where do you see the Democratic Party going in the next few years? I mean, certainly, you consider yourself a more progressive member. Um, there's no doubt that there are less progressive members and more centrist and liberal members of the party that you would be working with in Congress. Daniel Biss described it a couple days ago as he wants the party to be Manchin to Mamdani, something that Gavin Newsom also described. What's your take on that? And there's also critics of that who say, why should we be welcoming people into our party if they don't believe in any of the things that we believe in, or some crucial things that you have, talked about and fought for, and pushed your Democratic colleagues in Springfield to back as well?
Yeah. Matthew, can you recap that question for me,
Yeah,
please?
just generally, like, what's your view on where the Democratic Party is going ideologically? And is there room in the party for people who do not agree on a lot of the more progressive issues that seems like some voters are starting to back? And how do you balance that as a member of Congress going forward, as somebody who presumably would be, an outwardly progressive one?
Yeah. I mean, I think that the Democratic Party has always been a bit of a big tent. And the reality is that the reason that I'm a Democrat is because I am inspired by the accomplishments that uh, people who are Democrats and Congress and the United States Senate have been able to achieve over generations, whether we're talking about the New Deal, whether we're talking about the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which partially opened up immigration laws, which allowed my Black Ethiopian father to immigrate here. He would not have been able to do that under the immigration laws prior to the Civil Rights Act, partially enabled by Democrats, by a Democratic president, Lyndon Baines Johnson, and there are a number of others that are beneficial to communities like mine and those across the Ninth District. When we talk about creating Social Security, when we talk about the Medicaid and Medicare programs, when we talk about the child tax credit that was passed at the federal level under the previous administration, those are policy accomplishments that originated with Democrats, both progressives and those that are less progressive. And I take a very open-minded approach to the Democrats that I work with. I'm not known in the Illinois Senate as a bomb thrower. I'm not known as somebody that comes in and just sort of attacks everybody and then looks for allies. I start off with what are the goals that I have to represent my communities? What is it that the district that represented me needs, and who can I work with to make that happen? But I don't. I'm a visionary. I am. I really am somebody that has a great deal of optimism about the kind of policies that can be created that can make life better for millions of people. When we talk about abolishing ICE, think about these immigrant and migrant communities out there right now that are afraid to leave their apartments. My uncle is an Evanstonian and an Ethiopian immigrant whose brother was abducted in Ethiopia during the Red Terror. He is afraid to leave his apartment right now without his passport. I want to give those households and those families hope. And I think I embody all the things that they believe in this country. And so I'm going to always work with whoever I can to accomplish that, but I'm going to never lose sight of my values and the things that the values and ideas that even made it possible for me to be here as the first openly gay member of the Illinois Senate, as somebody that has a shot at running for Congress in an open primary in a democracy where the results are not cooked up from the start. I believe in that, and I want to fight for that because that precise vision for America right now is under threat and is being dismantled every day. And so, I would also say in the Illinois Senate, while I'm proud to be an outspoken progressive, I've been able to pass legislation with moderate Democrats because I engage them, I talk to them, and I try to remind them about what's at stake when we're talking about the child tax credit, which is going to benefit working class households in my district and theirs. Or when I've worked with Republicans on transportation legislation, I've passed several bills in the Illinois Senate that remove requirements for those that are beneficiaries of free and reduced transit. A lot of them are our seniors and those that are disabled, by removing requirements that they have to keep recertifying that they're disabled or that they're a senior. If you're a senior, you're going to always be a senior. We shouldn't put that extra onus on those constituents to have to keep coming in and engaging with bureaucracy. And that type of common sense, pragmatic legislation is reflected in so much of my record in the Illinois Senate. And I'm proud that I can be a effective legislator and a pragmatic person that approaches policy, but also an outspoken progressive that has very clear values. And I'm not going to compromise on those values. I can't compromise with Democrats running for president in 2028 that think that we should dial back the rights for our trans communities. I can't support that, and I can't support a candidate like that running for Congress. I don't think they belong in the Democratic Party, not in 2026 and not in 2028, when our trans families are being hunted left and right and have had their rights taken away from them. I can't support a Democrat running for president that can't talk about Roe v. Wade and why that was a fundamental right to bodily autonomy that was stripped from all of us in 2022. There are just some fundamental core values and priorities that have to be a part of the Democratic Party, and I'm proud to represent that. And I think that's the only way that our party is going to have a robust future, frankly.
What are those core values? You said that if a Democrat is not willing to support trans rights, that they shouldn't be a Democrat. What else? I mean, what other core values are there besides that one? And you mentioned Roe v. Wade as well, because this kind of the core of the question I was asking was someone like Joe Manchin, who's obviously not in the Senate anymore, but these really moderate to even conservative Democrats, sometimes they're called the blue dog Democrats. Like, do you don't think that there's room for them in the party, um, or at least
No, no,
yeah,
I would
just
actually.
clarify.
Yeah, when I say there are some Democrats that shouldn't be in a party, I think there are some issues that should just be the ante. If you're a Democrat, you believe in the little person. You believe in that mom and pop small business. You believe in the working class folks who are being union busted right now, and are gig workers that are being asked to be baristas and union Uber drivers and everything else, but we can't get politicians to put their weight on the line to make sure they have retirement security, make sure they have health care. Those are the types of fights that I need Democrats fighting in my generation, and those are the Democrats that I'm always going to be prepared to support. Those are also going to be some more moderate Democrats who, frankly, a lot of times share the same goals but have a different approach to getting there. I'm open to that, and I recognize that the Democratic Party is a big tent, but there are some fundamental issues, particularly when identities are being weaponized, and you have Democrats that are advancing that we go backwards on civil rights. When you take away the rights of trans people to exist, you're taking away their civil rights. And if you're taking away their civil rights, you're taking away my civil rights and all of us and our communities that are potentially targeted. And so that's the philosophy that I think is the big tent for the Democratic Party right now. But you're gonna have moderates in the mix too that can vote for the child tax credit. You're gonna have moderate blue dog Democrats that understand that you better not touch Medicaid and Medicare or Social Security. Those are fundamental entitlements that Americans have come to expect and depend on. And I think the rest will take care of itself.
Who do you view as the leader of the Democratic Party right now? It can be a couple of names, but I'm looking for names in particular. I know people don't like to do that, but I think voters deserve to hear a couple of names. Um,
Of course, of course. I'm proud. I'm proud. Barack Obama, I think, is always going to be someone that my generation. I was in my early 20s when Barack Obama became president of the United States. I always be inspired by the history that he made, that we helped to make happen. And I think that all of us right now kind of miss that functional approach to government, the sense that we can get things done the way we did when the Affordable Care Act was signed into law, and so Lilly Ledbetter and so many other key accomplishments that were made then. And so it's there's so many people that I think about when I think about who's key in the Democratic Party. Even right now in Congress, I really appreciate and am inspired by the approach that AOC is taking to social media, and how she uses social media to empower her constituents and include them on the debates and discussions that are happening in the Congress, and the things that she's having to navigate. As somebody that really believes in progressive values, I value that. I think about Representatives Greg Cesar as a proud progressive coming out of Texas, who's fighting the good fight for our folks down there that are experiencing union busting and are living in a deep red state. I think about folks like Representative Robert Garcia out of California, who is one of the first openly LGBTQ people to serve in the Congress. Those people inspire me because they make it clear the type of representation that's possible when it's embodied. And I want to be the same example and the same inspiration for other people around our country who could look at me and say, there is a openly gay and black congressperson out of Illinois representing the Ninth District, who's proud of who they are, and they're not hiding it, and they're not compromising on their identity. I think that inspires the next generation of LGBTQ youth, who are 17 and 18 years old right now, who are having to read about book banning, where in some parts of the country you can't have, if you are a teacher, you can't have a picture of a same-sex partner on your desk because somebody may object to that because it violates their worldview. That to me is a big problem. For our 17 and 18-year-olds who are watching homophobia and transphobia happening at a pace that it didn't happen in my generation just 20 years ago. And so those are some of the members that inspire me right now. I'm really inspired by Jan Schakowsky and what she was able to accomplish in Congress over the last 30 years as a proud progressive champion, who fought for bodily autonomy, and who fought for consumer protection, where her career started, and in terms of making things safer, products safer for Americans. I want to carry that legacy forward and really advancing the work that we need to do to protect our Americans from financial products that are just as dangerous as a baby crib holder, that could collapse. A retirement security product that can all of a sudden turn around on the person that has it, and become a predatory product. We need people that understand that. And I think that I've just listed for you a number of Democrats that I think, I'm proud to call Democrats and that inspire me and that are role models.
Another somewhat related to the idea of Democrats not agreeing on everything. Um, you have openly called out Israel for committing a genocide in Gaza. You have been outspoken about that. You've also been outspoken about AIPAC directly in this campaign. Obviously, as I've reported and as people have you know begun learning about more and more, AIPAC is actively supporting one of your opponents in this campaign, although doing so quietly. You've called that out, but kind of speak to that a little bit about what that means if an outside organization like that is willing to quietly support one of your opponents in this race, one of your colleagues as well in the state senate. It's State Senator Laura Fine. It's no secret at this point. Although to just preface she has still denied that the organization is supporting her. Um, what's your response to voters who are concerned that some Democrats are taking a position that is not agreed to by some more moderate Democrats, specifically on genocide and using that specific term. This is a very Jewish community. There's also a large Orthodox Jewish community, a more conservative one, who I think for the large part would disagree with your characterization. How do you still speak to those voters and convince them that you can still hear what their side of this is and are willing to listen to them?
Absolutely. And I think, where it starts for me is, you brought up the genocide in Gaza. I wasn't the person that created that characterization. This is the decree of international genocide scholars. Let's be clear about that. That have said that the tens of thousands of people in Gaza who have been air-stricken, who have been bombed, who have been displaced, who are starving, and who have been separated from their families are experiencing a genocide. And I want to have moral clarity on this issue. I think this is something that our generation is going to have to reckon with. And so that is absolutely what I have said. That said, we need to also talk about this. The rampant increase in anti-Semitism in this country and across the world keeps me up at night. It is something I think about. I think about how I, as a Black person, understand how racism impacts Black communities. And so I'm going to have a deep degree of sympathy and empathy for my Jewish siblings, who are feeling this right now. And I know they're feeling it because they talk to me about it. I have people in my own extended community, who are afraid right now in the way that they may have not been 20 years ago. And so we have to be talking about anti-Semitism. I live in the Rogers Park community, where even in my own neighborhood, we've heard about Jewish synagogues that have been targeted, and that outrages me. It breaks my heart to see that happening. And as a member of Congress, and what I've said on the campaign trail is, count on me to be outspoken on this. Count on me to push back on anti-Semitism. Count on me to make sure that our synagogues are safe and that they don't have to think about violence all of a sudden showing up at their doorsteps. And so that's the kind of passionate heart that I have, that I think my constituents and voters I've talked to, they appreciate that I understand the pain that they feel, that I understand the trauma that they feel, that they felt on October 7th as a result of Hamas. And I think that's what we need in the ninth district. It's such a diverse district. We need a member of Congress that is going to be on the ground, and feel the pain of their constituents, and not make anybody feel like they've been left out of the priorities. And that's I think that's so important.
What's your response to Democrats who won't call it a genocide? I mean, you've been very outspoken in recent weeks, in particular. Um, it's kind of big and bold on your campaign website. There are several other candidates in this race who have as well, but not everybody has. What's your response to some of your opponents, or just Democrats more broadly, who have not done that?
I think we need moral clarity on this issue. I just think about I literally am haunted when I sleep, when I see images of children, Palestinian children in Gaza who have been bombed and who have been starved. It's not normal, it's not natural for that to happen. That is not what any civil society should be experiencing. And I think about my family fleeing Ethiopia when similar things were starting to happen there. And so I think I have a responsibility to call this out in any society, in any context. There's a genocide that is happening right now in Sudan, and I don't hear a whole lot of members of Congress talking about that. We should. There is a refugee crisis and a mass displacement that is happening in Congo right now. There is an ongoing genocide that is happening in Ethiopia and Eritrea, and now we have a forever war that has started in Venezuela. We have to have moral clarity about these issues and international affairs that affect so many people in the Ninth District because they're one or two generations in from those places. We have people who are new refugees from Ukraine who feel the trauma and the pain of family separation. And we need a member of Congress from this district who's going to be in touch with that. And so, for anyone that can't call the genocide in Gaza, can't call that out, it breaks my heart and it discourages me because it's so clearly what so many see right now, including international genocide scholars. And I think that the moment demands better.
You brought up Venezuela, and so I want to ask you about Venezuela. Um, what was your reaction on Saturday morning when you woke up and started reading the news about the strikes in Venezuela? And do you think that the President Trump was wrong entirely in going in and capturing Nicolas Maduro? And is there any room for agreement with some of Republicans who say this was good, or Venezuelan Americans who are celebrating this? I know you called it a forever war. Why specifically are you calling it that? And if elected to Congress, how would you want to see your fellow members of Congress actually uh, legislate when it comes to this if it remains an issue a year from now?
Yeah. So let's start with Saturday morning. So, I think the central problem here for me is unlawful actions of the Trump administration. That is, let's just put a circle around that. Because no matter what you have to say about whether or not we should be embroiled in an undefined war in Venezuela that even the Trump administration has not been able to explain in terms that make sense what that means or how long this is going to happen and what the objectives are. And so, where was the authorization from Congress on this? Where was the respect for the Congress as a whole distinct branch of government on this? It didn't exist. This was done unilaterally by the Trump administration, and that is unconstitutional and is a big problem. And so I said on Saturday morning, and I'm saying it now, and I've been saying this for months, is that Donald Trump should be impeached. We can't equivocate on this. And Donald Trump has got to go. Kristi Noem has got to go. Secretary Marco Rubio and Secretary Peter Heggs have got to go, and they need to be impeached. And so on the question of Maduro, two things can be true at the same time here. That Donald Trump has taken us unlawfully into a war with Venezuela that has been ill-defined, and there's no clear sense of what the cost is going to be to American taxpayers or to our service members that are going to carry the legacy of this. There's been no discussion of that, and certainly Congress has been iced out of that discussion. But at the same time, we know that the people in Venezuela that feel that Maduro was a tyrant. And so I think that Donald Trump should have a conversation with members of Congress and those that serve on the House Foreign Affairs Committee and the Senate Foreign Relations Committee on what that looks like. This ought to be a conversation around national security. What we haven't had a discussion around national security when it comes to Venezuela. What we have had is fragile men, boys with toys, as I like to call them, who are much more interested in big oil and big profits. That's what I think this is all about. And Donald Trump has said so himself that he plans to make some money on the oil of Venezuela. And that is what a dangerous and reckless way to get us all embroiled into another forever war or foreign policy crisis when Donald Trump himself has said that this is all about enriching him and his cronies.
I want to start wrapping up here, but I do want to ask you some rapid fire questions. It can be more than just a yes or no, but like a short response just to a couple of quick questions would be great. Um, I think you'd support Medicare for all, if I'm not mistaken, correct? What does that look like for you? And is that an entire single payer healthcare system?
Yeah, I think ultimately it is an entire single payer healthcare system. Universal healthcare for me is the North Star. But I'd say where I'd start with Medicare for all is let's increase the eligibility on those that can qualify for Medicaid. I've been proud in the Illinois Senate to be working on this as a multi-year fight, where I've introduced legislation that would give people coverage of Medicaid up to 200% of the federal poverty level. Right now, it's six and 133% of the federal poverty level, and it's gonna get more people who are in this donut hole where they are too wealthy for Medicaid but don't make enough money to qualify for the ACA exchanges, and definitely don't have enough income to pay for any kind of Cadillac health insurance that most of us are able to enjoy. Certainly, those who are elected officials get to enjoy that version. So that's where I would start off, and as a serious progressive and as an effective legislator who knows how to do this, is let's think about expanding the eligibility on Medicaid, and keep pushing until we can actually have universal health care in this country. We Americans have been waiting over a generation for this, and I think we got to keep fighting for it.
You've talked a little bit about campaign finance. What does campaign finance reform look like for you? And what kind of policies would you support to actually make those changes?
I would start off with there's legislation that I've introduced in the Illinois Senate that would create a small dollar match program for those that are seeking state and legislative office. It mirrors a proposal I've brought forward as a congressional candidate, that I would act on as a member of Congress, that would create a national pilot for those that are running for office that are swearing off corporate PAC money the way I am. I'm not taking any corporate PAC money in this race. For those that are swearing off APAC, I'm not taking an APAC or special interest. I think that those candidates out there that are willing to do that deserve to have a public match program, where they can raise money from folks who live in the district that are concerned about having good government and strong, competent legislators. And then let's match that to encourage them and to break down the structural wall that keeps folks like them out of the process. The same way that these structural walls make it harder for me as a candidate of color, as an openly gay candidate, to raise money, to get in and to get in a position to win a congressional seat. It doesn't daunt me, and it shouldn't daunt anyone else that wants to do this. And I think a small dollar match program would be a really important step forward on that. The other thing I would say too is we got
Uh,
Citizens v. United. This has unleashed unlimited amounts of super PAC dollars, dark money into congressional races all across the country. I know what it's like to be in a candidate where I'm an opponent of those that are purported to be taking money from super PAC. And so it's time to overturn that decision. And we need to have a small dollar match program so that we can have a Congress that actually looks like America.
Um, do you support shutting down the federal government as a response or tactic to push back against the Trump administration? You kind of criticized some Democrats for voting to reopen the government. I think that was back in November, if I'm not mistaken. What's your view on that? And is that an effective tactic that you think Democrats should be using more often? I know it's going to become an issue in just a couple of weeks as well.
Yeah, it's not ideal, and it's not something that I would ever just want to start out with. But I do think that there are times when it absolutely is an effective tactic. And in the instance here, healthcare to me is a human right. It just is. And so when it comes to these kind of anti issues, right, or just the whole basic discussion around reproductive rights and how those are taken away. Sometimes we're going to have to fight our good fight, but there are times when we're going to have to shut the place down, to make it clear to tyrants who are in charge of Congress, and tyrants in the White House, that we will not just be steamrolled on these core issues that are too important to our constituents.
You support bans on congressional stock trading?
I do, 100%.
And last question, what's your biggest political regret that you've had? I know you were appointed to the state senate in 2021 and you were reelected in 2022 and 2024. So you've had 5 years there. Um, what's your biggest regret in those times? What is something that you wish you had done differently, or a vote you've taken that you wish you hadn't taken, or just something generally that you wish you had communicated about differently?
Yeah. I'll be honest. No regrets. I don't. I think that elected officials are human beings just like everybody else, and there are any person is always going to reflect on what they do and think about ways to learn from their mistakes and do things better next time. But I think that I give myself a lot of grace for running for office in in systems that are not designed for me. It is not. I'm the first person like myself to ever serve in the Illinois Senate in the 207-year history of Illinois. We've never had an openly gay member serve in that body. So I give myself a lot of grace on how hard it is to serve there, and for others like me, that I'm busting a glass ceiling for them, so we can have a trans person serve in the Illinois Senate, and those that come from the extended LGBTQ IA community. And there's so many beautiful things about that journey. There are always times I feel like I should be using the power that I've been entrusted with for a limited time to push harder, to fight harder. I carry those burdens on my shoulders. When I about those folks in Rogers Park in Evanston, who were dragged out of their apartments and who were dragged out of their cars, like someone was right down the street from where I live at 2 Western in broad daylight. I smashed open his car and dragged him out and left the car seat and his identification and his ID on this car seat. I think about those folks and I think about how hard I want to fight for them every day, and it literally keeps me up at night. And I try to do everything I can to make life better for them, and I'm proud of the work that I've done.
Well, I appreciate you joining us. You're the first of the interviews so far. We're going to be offering the same interview to as many of the candidates as we can before early voting starts in 1 month. So, State Senator Mike Simmons, thank you so much.
Thanks, Matthew.